Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Desert Island Pics. And this evening, my guest is Khurram Khan, and he's all lined up in my virtual green room, and we'll get talking to Khurram right after this. Khurram, welcome.
Hi,
Good
how
to
you
see
doing,
you.
Rob? Glad,
I'm
glad
doing
to
I'm
be
doing
here.
well. Yeah, you okay?
I'm wonderful. Enjoying
Great.
a lazy Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like doing these on a Sunday. You know, 'cause it's a lot less stressful than a midweek day. So yeah,
No,
good.
definitely.
Well,
Winding down the weekend.
yeah, we'll try and make it not a lazy show, but a relaxed show. You know,
Fair
continue
enough.
your relaxed Sunday for you. So thanks very much for coming on.
But thanks for
Um,
having me.
so before we get into it, I'll just say to people that we're here to sort of answer questions, or if you want to stop by and say hello, then please do that. Put a comment in the chat, and I'll catch up with comments as we go through. But if you have got a question for Khurram or for me, or about anything photography related or wildlife related, even, then just put that in the chat, and we'll catch up with comments as we go through. So yeah. So Khurram, do you want to start by telling people a little bit about yourself? For those that don't know you, I mean, I think most people will, certainly from your social media feeds, if nothing else. So, but yeah, do you want to give people a bit of background?
Wonderful. All right. So, yeah, not much. I've been, from a photographic perspective, I've been doing this for, I would say, 10 years now. Um, I'm a physician, so that takes the bulk of my time, young kids, young family, whatever time I have free, I like to photograph. I got back, I actually used to photograph back in the day when I was young with a film camera. My dad got me one, I think it was a Minolta, I don't even remember.
I was going to say
Uh,
one of my questions was what was your first camera? So I guess that's
it was a
answering that
Minolta, yeah,
question.
that was that. And then sort of, as you get into your teenage years, I gave it up and then picked it up again as I turned 30. And it so happened that, I'd bought a camera because my family was visiting and we were taking a ferry to the Empire State Building and I saw some gulls flying around and I took a few shots. And when I looked at them, I sort of liked it. And then from there it grew and here we are,
Yeah, and the rest is history.
as they
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, it's a good job that everybody's sort of seen your images. So I think they're all glad that you picked the camera up again. I mean, was it
I
was it
would
a
hope so.
digital was it a digital camera that you picked up in your?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a Nikon D90.
yeah, I remember
I
those.
think
Yeah,
it was a good one. It was like what, 12 megapixels,
some
six.
was
I don't
it
even remember at this
something like that.
point.
I think at
Something
that
like
point
that.
I was a Canon shooter at that point. So yeah,
Were you?
yeah, I had the original. Uh, what was it? The five, whatever it was, the first sort of full
One of
frame
those, yeah.
first full frame cameras, the 5D or whatever it was called. Yeah, it was,
Yeah, I
and
didn't venture into the Canon world for like maybe a year.
yeah, I mean that was a
And
game changing camera when that came out. I remember it, 12 megapixels. It was huge. It was enormous. We're never going to need a bigger sensor than that.
done this. Look at where we are now, right?
And look at where we are now. I mean, we're medium format, aren't we? With
With
35
what we're
mil
doing, yeah,
effectively. Yeah,
pretty much.
it's incredible. I mean, what's the because we were talking off air actually about the
Mhm.
Z9 and the Sonys and things that you use. What's the Z9? It's 40,
45 megapixels,
yeah,
right?
something like that.
45
Yeah,
megapixels, 20 frames a second, and then you
in
come home
RAW.
and you in RAW, and then you have these birds twitching, and then you got every little twitch and all that stuff. So
Yeah,
I think for the most part, it allows you to get all these images, but there's a lot of culling involved afterward.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we were talking about this off air, but we'll get into that, I should think, as we go through the evening.
Absolutely.
But fair few, got a few comments coming in. Linda says, "Hi, hope I got this right. How do I listen?" Well, hopefully, Linda, the sound will be coming through loud and clear for you now. So yeah, let's fingers crossed for that. Scott Vincent says, "Hi all, hello Scott," and Tamir Khan says, "Hi, big fan." And Gail's on, Gail Beeson, obviously another one of our
There you
wildlife
go.
judges. Hi, guys. She says, "Hi, Gail. Hope everything's well with you." And Nick Patel, "Hi, Rob and Khurram. Hi, Nick. Hope everything's good with you." And Linda again says, "Hi, all." So there we are. And I said, if you want to come in and say hello or ask any questions, then do. And Linda says she's on. Oh, and Josh is on as well. So Josh
Josh.
Galicki. So he's just saying, "Hey guys." So hi, Josh.
Hi,
Hope
Josh.
all's well with you. So because you two know each other quite well, don't you?
I know him a little bit.
Yeah.
He's all right.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah.
As they go.
As they go. Exactly.
Shall we share your first image, Khurram, and
Absolutely.
get talking about some photography? So let me add this into the stream, and the first one is yeah, what's his Nashville warbler? Is it?
It's a Nashville warbler.
Yeah.
So warblers were and still are. They have a very important place for me. This is what got me serious, I would say. These are New World warblers that basically are not here. They only show up for about a couple of months, and Nashville is one of them. It's a hard bird to get. It's not that common. Has very specific breeding requirements. So once you get into sort of songbirds and everything, and then you eventually start digging through the species, you realize this is one of those you want to definitely photograph. And this happened to be actually with Josh. We were like almost we couldn't get anything. It was pouring down.
I was going to say it looks pretty wet.
So we're like, okay, we really can't do anything. But today we were about to bag it, and then we heard this guy singing. We set up blinds on the side of the road. Nobody was there, and he actually was a very cooperative bird. Never had a better session with the Nashville after that.
Because I mean, the light looks pretty low here as well.
Yes, it is. I mean, you were sort of on the side of a road on the edge of a small hill, so we're sort of shooting down at it. And he's quite high because he's on the downslope of a mountain.
Yeah.
And the rain definitely helped the colors pop, saturated everything.
I was going to say, actually, the rain really makes it, doesn't it? Because you've got those water droplets coming off those, off the leaves, and the colors are really saturated. So
absolutely, just it gives the image that contrast.
Yeah. So who got the better shot, you or Josh?
I think this session I did. I think he missed this one.
Oh, did he? Well, maybe you'll tell us.
Probably. Yeah, we were in separate blinds, so obviously you were limited to what I could see out of my blind, and he was limited to what he could see. So I think I had a better angle in this pass.
Yeah. Okay.
He got some good feeding behavior, so don't feel too sorry for him.
No, I never feel sorry for Josh. He comes up with some amazing stuff, as you know. Exactly. Yeah, Josh says Khurram is definitely right.
So, but I think for this one I beat him.
Yeah.
So and this was the Nikon, right? So it was it was a D850.
The D850.
Yeah, we were talking about
we were talking about
9 frames a second.
Yeah, well, because people might know that actually I've been playing around with, because I was still shooting with the D800 because I'm too tight. I'm too tight to keep buying new cameras, and I was putting all my money into wild art anyway. So, and that was kind of more important to me than upgrading. But in the end, I just thought with the Z9 coming on, everybody's selling their D850s, so I picked up this D850 that and I was telling you off air. Literally, it arrived. It was secondhand, and I got it from a reputable secondhand dealer. And honestly, if somebody had told me the camera was brand new, I would have believed them. It was absolutely unmarked, and it was a low shutter count, and it was an absolute bargain. So yeah,
Like we were talking about,
Z9.
it's the best camera ever made,
Yeah.
best DSLR ever made.
Yeah,
I think, in my opinion, overall.
and I kind of looked at it and I thought, yeah, I know the Z9 has got this fantastic eye tracking and everything else, and it's 20 frames a second in RAW, but I looked at it and I think this is a good point for people actually as well, is when you're thinking about upgrading gear, is actually think what use you're going to put it to, and actually all those new features, how much extra you're going to get out of it. And is it worth it? Because I thought, how many situations do I need 20 frames a second over the 9 frames a second I'm getting with the D850?
Unless you're
Very,
always
very few.
exactly, unless you're really doing, action photography all the time.
Yeah.
One of the advantages is to, change your composition in camera once it locks on with the tracking. But you can sort of do that with the back button autofocus anyhow.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and not change your composition, or I mean, change your composition once you get focused. So, the advantages are there, but they're not that much.
Yeah. And I just thought, yeah, okay, for that 1 or 2% of my photography where that would be an advantage, is it worth the extra £4,000 that it would be? And the answer to that was no. So
No, probably not.
So I thought, no, I'll get the D850 and then I'll wait for the next generation of Z9, and I'll buy a secondhand Z9 off somebody else for a lot less money.
Well,
and so it goes on.
I saw your video the other day photographing those flowers.
Yeah.
One of the problems with these bigger pro bodies, you can't get low,
Yeah.
as much as you would with if you take your battery grip off, you're like next to the ground.
Yeah.
I realized that last year we were photographing frogs, and then, I had to take the battery grip off the A1 just to get lower.
Yeah.
So for a Z9, you won't be able to unless you want to dip it in the water or something, which
you don't want to be doing that. Not considering how much they are. Crikey.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Actually, I'd never really thought of that, but you're absolutely right. Because a lot of the time, as just people have seen. In fact, the latest video I did was on photographing early spider orchids and snake's head fritillaries, and I literally had the camera on the ground. I mean, it has got the battery grip on it actually, but I could take it off if I wanted to. That's the advantage with the 850.
And get even lower if you want to.
And get even lower if I needed to. I mean, I didn't need to in that particular circumstance, but you're absolutely right. With small stuff, and you want to get right, because with photograph, as we all know, photographing flowers, photographing birds, getting eye level with the bird or getting ground level with the flower is really important, to create the sort of, photography that, that you and I tend to do. So,
yeah. I mean, it creates separation, creates that intimacy, creates that contact, seeing the world from their level. So definitely, I mean, there are reasons to go higher, there are reasons to go lower. As long as you do them right, it's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's all about taking the images that you want to take as well. Where if you prefer a higher angle because you want, I mean, reflections are a really good example of that, aren't they? When you to go a little bit higher, is an advantage in that situation.
Pretty much. Or you have some amazing light coming on out of the water or something like that, you would definitely want to go higher.
Yeah. Okay, let's just catch up with a few more comments. A few coming in.
Sure.
Where are we? I think Shaheen Fatima says hello all, and in fact Josh says I had him set his blind up in front of me with a smiley face. yeah, you just weren't quick enough, Josh, I reckon. And Andrew McLaughlin says hi guys. Hi Andrew. Obviously you'll remember Andrew from our last desert island pics. So for people that didn't see that, and for people that might be wondering what this is all about, I'll give you I should have done this at the start. I'll give you the sort of format of proceedings. I mean, basically it's based on a radio show in the UK that's been running for years and years and years, and it's extremely popular over here, and it's based on a celebrity interview or somebody of note, and they asked them to select 8 songs that they couldn't live without if they were cast away and stranded on a fictional desert island. So I thought we'd have a play on that theme and just go for 10 images with photographers that define them as photographers. And there are a few other little fun things that go on, and we'll get to that later on. But so this is obviously your first shot. Oh, Ben Pullitz is on as well. He says, hiya guys. Hi Ben.
I
And
bet.
I thought it was pub time for you, Ben. Anyway, talking of pub time, cheers, Khurram.
Cheers.
Okay, so let's go for your second image. There we are. And when I saw this, I just found it extraordinary because I loved it. It's not just I like images that tell stories, and I think like a lot of the judges in wild art, for example, a lot of those sort of photographers, they like images that tell stories too. I think it gives us an image a lot more depth if you're if it if it's not, if it goes beyond just that sort of initial, what I call a sort of chocolate fix image, where you get that initial sort of chocolate hit and you go, oh, that was
Wow
really
factor,
nice,
yeah.
and
And then
then it's sort of okay, it was all right, and it's, but this is more like a gourmet meal because you keep coming back to it, and and there's
to
more
it,
to it, and you want to keep coming back for another mouthful, and this is one of those images, and I think what does it is it's the eye contact that you have with that bear, and
with the
that's
picture,
an
yeah.
extremely important element in photography, because we're talking about creating connection with the viewer by getting low with the birds and with the plants, but this is another way that connection with the viewer is created. It's that eye contact, because without it, it's just not the same image, is it? So give us a bit of background to this.
So this is in a village just outside of well, actually, it's on a barrier island just outside of the village of Kaktovik. It's the last town before you move further east into Canada, like really
Mm.
at the north slope of Alaska. Um, they are allowed to have, I think, last I checked, 3 or 4 legal bowhead whales hunt. And
Yeah.
once they're done, they'll leave the carcass outside of town. So the mothers, and with their generally year 1 year or like that year, the born cubs will hang out and they will sort of scavenge. And so we went there. This was in 2018. One of the guides basically told us that now obviously the ice forms late, and it thaws earlier than usual, so the bears are stuck on land for longer periods of time than they used to
Mm.
in the past. And polar bears rely on seals to hunt. They eat seals in the wintertime, so they need to go out when the water freezes, find those water holes, hunt the seals, and that's how they survive. So more time on land means they're not really putting on that much weight, which obviously leads to less reproductive success and so on and so forth. And obviously these guys are in trouble. However, in this particular area, because of this practice, bears are actually doing rather well.
Mm.
That time that they lose by going on the ice is sort of, there was a whole study on it that I actually read. They actually are able to sustain themselves while scavenging on the remains of the whales. So people have turned that into a business, and they have workshops. You go, you get a guide, and they take you around in a boat. And as the ocean is freezing, you sort of float around in a boat with a distance, and you're able to photograph. On this particular afternoon, this little, I think maybe a 1-year-old cub or maybe less, hard to say, was playing around on the skull of the whale. And this was the only frame I got where it actually looked at us. I have so many
Yeah.
frames of him, but it was just all over the place. And so that was, I was lucky I got that. And the other thing was, obviously you gotta, pay attention to how you expose this image, because it's all white or just dark. Like there's
Yeah. Do you
black.
want to? Yeah. Do you want to give people a few tips on sort of photographing in the snow? Because you obviously remember we had Vicky Santello on with that amazing bobcat and the mallard image, and we were talking to her about
Exactly.
photographing in the snow, because it's not easy, is it? The
Oh no, it's
exposure is
not. I
really
mean,
tricky.
if you leave the camera and you let it do what the camera wants to do, it'll basically turn everything gray. So you're going to have generally an underexposed image, and it's going to try to basically make the dark parts lighter and the lighter parts darker. So you just have to overexpose, generally by a stop and a half. That's the easiest tip to
Mm.
do. You can do it several different ways. You can spot meter it if you're on an auto exposure, and then on your exposure compensation, usually take like 1.5, sometimes even 2+, and go from there. Or if you're manually doing it, it's easy to adjust your exposure
Yeah.
for
What do
generally.
you do? What are you doing here, and what do you normally shoot? Do you normally shoot fully manual, or do you do aperture
I
priority with?
started with aperture priority. Then, somewhere in 2017, 2018, I switched to fully manual. This was fully manual, and now I'll basically sometimes go back to uh, just auto ISO,
Yeah.
mainly because some of these cameras are just ridiculous, and noise is a thing of the
Well, it's
past.
just not. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, with
So
with Topaz, you don't, who worries about it these
true,
days? Yeah.
true. Yeah, so it's like, okay, so sometimes I'll do that, especially when the light is changing. But if I have constant light on a day like this, manually expose, meter off the snow, give it like a 1/3, or I think here I was probably 2+ over, and then
Yeah.
just keep on shooting and don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that we've made before in the lives, talking to other people as well. It's getting to know how your camera meters for light, and once you understand how that works, and once you're comfortable with setting everything yourself, and so you're telling the camera what you want it to do rather than the camera telling you what it what it's going to do, then you can control these situations, and it's so important to be able to do that, to get the most out of these situations. I mean,
Uh,
I know you could have, if you'd have underexposed this image by 2 stops, you could have gone and fixed that in post. But
Easily. I mean, with a
yeah,
D850, definitely
yeah, and that that file would have taken it. However, it's far better to get it right,
to get it
because then
right.
you've got a little bit more latitude in that raw file. If you needed it, like if you needed to bring up some of the shadow areas, in the skull, for example, underneath a bit more,
Exactly.
without introducing any noise, you've got the ability to do that. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the only thing that I would never give control of is the shutter speed and the f-stop. So aperture and shutter, I almost always want to control, because that determines the look of the image.
Yeah.
So I will never let the camera decide on that, because the camera may want to give me an f10 setting, for example, but I don't want to shoot at f10. If you're shooting shutter priority, unless you're really doing motion blur. But if I want to control my depth of field, I want to control my shutter speed, the ISO. I mean, I'll tell the cameras, okay, if I'm doing that, okay, don't go beyond 12,800, or don't go beyond 6,400. So let the camera give it a range. Or this day it was completely manual, because the light was just, the whole afternoon was even.
Hmm. What what will you shoot at? What's the sort of highest ISO you tend to sort of shoot at these days? Because I know we were talking about obviously the Z9, which you've
No, no.
got,
I mean, I haven't,
and the Sony
like,
too.
yeah. So obviously, I've got more experience with my Sony gear than I do with the Z9. I've shot the A1s at 12,800 easy. I have no
Yeah.
problem with that, unless I'm gonna start, cropping an image, or I need to pick some shadows up. Those at
Mm.
12,800 or even higher than that, you can do okay, as long as you're not cropping an image. If you crop an
Yeah.
image in post, it falls apart very, very quickly.
Yeah. Or if you're
You know,
pushing it around quite hard in post processing.
in post
Yeah.
processing,
Yeah.
most of these cameras are good. They have like 15 stops, 14 stops, whatever, ridiculous amounts of dynamic range. Josh is going to have a chuckle when I mention dynamic range. I always keep beating up on him. His Canons don't have enough. So, uh, yeah, but but
I'm sure he's got an answer to that.
I'm pretty sure.
we'll,
I'm sure he's
we'll,
having a chuckle.
we'll probably get it as well in a minute.
Yeah. So the thing with that is, like, yeah, you can definitely push these images, and this is this is one of my most favorite images of myself. Again, D850.
Yeah,
So
D850. Yeah, I tell you, I'm blown away by the files that I get
yeah,
out of that thing.
it's
Honestly,
very good. And something else to mention. I had the Sony A7R4, which is like 62 megapixels. I think between 40 and 50 is a sweet spot right
I
now.
was gonna say that, because there's a point, isn't
Yeah.
there, when the sensors are pushed just too
It's too
far.
much. So for the A7R4, for what I do, I mean, I'm sure there's, aspects of it of photography that people need it for.
Mm.
It got to the point where I was like, yeah, the image is too, because I got to crop, and then it just wasn't the same.
No.
So I think 40, 45, 50 is pretty good. Actually, one of the Sony's, the A7R III, was 42 megapixels. One of the best sensors I've ever used as well.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there is that sweet spot where because the thing is, the more pixels you fit into that 35 millimeter
Right.
space, the smaller they are. So
They
it
are
goes,
exactly.
it just has to go that they're not as good at gathering light,
Yeah,
as a big
exactly.
pixel, regardless of technology. And I know it's moved on, and I mean,
It's gotten better,
D,
but still,
yeah,
yeah,
when the D800 came out, for example, what, 8, 9 years ago, whenever it was
yeah,
now,
something,
we
yeah,
all just
yeah.
thought, "Oh my word, how are they going to
Goody,
make
yeah.
that work?" But the sensor on that was for the time was sweet. That's why I kept using it, because it was so good. The files that came out of that camera
They
were
were
so
so
good.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, they're so good. And the D850 is the same. I think that was a complete game changer when that came out.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I was one of the first ones to get that camera.
yeah,
So
yeah,
at least here, so it was an awesome camera. So yeah, that's a story about this little bear.
yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, let's see what you got next. Oh, because you've got a thing about snakes, haven't you?
Recently, a friend of ours, Matthew Sullivan, you may know him from Vet. I think he did
Yeah.
pretty
Yes.
well.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So
Yeah. With the salmon
yeah,
and yeah.
exactly. Matthew moved to Florida, so before he went, he sort of got us into the world of macro photography. This is new uh, to all of us, and then we started, getting into macro and looking at them. They're just absolutely beautiful animals. Like, the pattern that they have, the way they interact with their environment, it's such an absolutely amazing animal. And
Mm,
we don't have a lot of venomous snakes up here. We only have this one, which is the northern copperhead and the timber rattler. So, and they come out for a very short period of time, and then they go back in because it's too cold for them up here. So it's one of the good times to go out and photograph
and
them.
how the sort of population's doing?
I think okay. Not terrible. At least the places we went to. They're obviously, there's a, I forgot the name of the town. They used to have their rattlesnake roundouts even up here, so it was a little bit of a problem. They'll get killed in their cars when they're crossing the roads overnight by
Yeah.
cars. So, and we're just, there are too many humans and too many wild spaces left. So slowly and surely, we're digging into their, you know,
I mean, that's the
environment.
thing, isn't it? People. We have this. I mean, the only venomous animal we've got really in the UK is the European adder, and
Oh,
it's such. I mean, I guess like a lot of like probably this. I mean, I know it's not venomous, but like a lot of the species that you have as well, is that they're so shy. That's the thing that people don't realize about snakes. They don't want to interact with humans, and the adders will disappear if they hear you. They'll be gone. And
yeah.
it's only really in the spring that you tend to come across them with any great frequency,
eh,
because the males are out looking for females.
Females, yeah, and this was a gravid female, and she's sitting there. There was a log, and she was underneath the log, and she stayed there. She didn't strike once. She flicked her tail. We took our shots. We had the flash coming from the left, uh, gives it a directional light, and we photographed from a safe distance. And it's hard to tell, but we weren't even standing next to it. We were standing like on boulders, so we
Mm,
were away from the strike zone. And then using macro lenses to uh, go down. This was with the 200 millimeter lens, and so left her where she was. Uh, and so they're wonderful animal,
mm,
and obviously you got to be. I mean, if she did tag you, you'd be in a world of hurt, and
yeah.
possibly there are reports of people dying with this snake bite, but mostly from allergic reactions rather than anything
Yeah. Well, it's the same with the adder, actually. I think,
Yeah.
there have been people that have been recorded as dying, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very rare. And what normally happens is actually dog walkers will, although it's against the law to kill them,
Hmm.
a lot of dog walkers will kill them when they see them because they don't want them killing their or biting their dogs. And it's,
Biting their dogs.
and
Yeah,
it
it's
very, very
unfortunate.
rarely happens. I mean, it very rarely happens, but I mean, they're in such trouble here.
Yeah.
And
Well,
these things could be years and years old. I mean, this is what people don't realize.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
how old could that animal be? 10, 20 years old, quite easily.
Quite easily. I mean, I'm not a biologist, and this is
Yeah,
one of those genres of photography that I've only recently dwelt in. But this was hard to say. I mean, she's a gravid, so and if you kill her, there's a bunch of future generations
yeah,
too.
absolutely.
So you're
But
going to
what
lose
do you know?
out
What
on
I
that.
like about this image, and it goes back to actually, same with the skunk image that obviously you did well with, with Wild Art last year, is the subtle use of flash.
Flash.
It's the
Yeah.
skillful use of flash here to create that atmosphere. That's what I think is so remarkable about this picture. It's the sort of composition. It's quite a bold composition because you've put a sort of up in the sort of top right hand
Top
portion
right
of the
hand.
frame. It's not really a thirds thing going on here, although I guess you could say that she's sort of
You
on
can
that
make the face.
intersection.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
you know, you can't. There's a kind of few rules broken here, but I think it gives it. I think it gives this image context, and I don't think that you'd necessarily say that there was a flash used here. You'd almost think that it was ambient light from sort of an overcast day almost,
Yeah.
and you've sort of slightly underexposed it. That's what it looks like to me. So,
Yeah.
it's such a subtle use of flash. I think that's a really good lesson for people. That if you,
Flash.
yeah,
Yeah. I was watching your episode with Peter a couple
yeah,
of weeks ago. It
that was
was, yeah,
amazing, wasn't it? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it turned out to be a great lesson. People should go watch it if they haven't. The problem with Flash is not the Flash; it's people who use the Flash. If you're going to try to use a Flash in an automatic setting, you're going to likely over flash it.
Yeah.
You know, if you can make Flash look or feel like normal light, that's I think you've done a great job. And in order, what I mean by making something feel normal is you got to maintain shadows, right? So if you
Yeah.
even if you're using Flash, there has to be shadows. That's how natural light is. People have or animal or whatever. There's an illuminated area and there's a shadow area. So and the light shouldn't be harsh. So we have these diffusers that we see. They're big diffusers, and they'll even out the light and make the light soft and not harsh, and it'll spread it out more. Um, in always shoot manual flash. I actually had a blog on it I written once on my website, and then you put it on the left, give it a direction that sort of illuminates his environment, illuminates the
Mm.
eyes a little bit, and just a hint, and you maintain that shadow and
Yeah,
light
well,
area.
you're giving it a depth, aren't you? You're giving it a sort of
Yeah, mhm,
three-dimensional quality, which if you were more, if the flash was coming directly from the camera angle, you'd lose completely because it.
absolutely.
And I think there's a lot to be sort of learned from, say, landscape photographers, where they use that sort of side lighting to model, the landscapes that they're shooting. And okay, that's natural light, but they're not shooting with the sun behind them. And this is the
Yeah,
same with the flash. You've got it off at an angle, so you're creating a depth. But
absolutely.
it's such a subtle use. And I think there are a lot of people that are rather frightened of Flash because they don't really understand, how they can use it. But it's really worth learning about because and like anything in photography, it's a lot of trial and error. But in the digital age, you can learn quite a lot. And if you do go back and have a look at that video that that I the interview I had with Peter, he was talking about he's using sort of his kids' toys and things like that
Yeah, to set them up.
to practice these flash setups. So when he gets into the field, he knows what he's doing. um,
Exactly.
and it's practice, and it's just trial and error, but it's really worth it in these sorts of situations. I mean, what would you have got had you not got flash? What sort of image would you come away with here? Probably.
Probably just if you see the top left, top right of the frame
Yeah,
where you can see the dark coils, that's probably where the exposure was.
yeah,
So, one of the other things with flash is when you're doing it, another tip would be to expose for the background.
Mm.
So if you see some of these leaves had significant amount of highlights on them, especially this one dead yellow tree, yellow leaf right to the front of the animal with some
Yeah.
specular yellow. So you expose for them, everything's underexposed, and you fill it up with light. And if you give it a direction, you maintain that gradient between shadows and light and give
Yeah.
that pop sort of feel and a natural look.
And again, something you can learn from portrait photographers actually,
Hmm.
is the way they they start with a base image and then they add elements, they add these sort of light
Adamant, yeah,
elements in, and that's what you're basically doing here, isn't it? You're taking the
absolutely.
scene and you're going, right, okay, how can I improve that by adding in a source of artificial light?
Like
I think it's very, very
simple thing,
clever. Yeah,
simple thing would be expose for the highlights
yeah,
and fill your shadows with flash.
yeah, yeah. But control that flash, control the output, and you'll be
Exactly,
surprised. You'll be surprised actually, the results that you can get.
and diffuse it. You got
Yeah,
to
and
diffuse it.
diffuse it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have. Okay. All right. Well, let's see what's next. Now, this is an image that I was really interested in, because this is something that, or it sort of depicts an area that actually I want to explore a bit more in my own photography. And of course, Josh and I we're doing I don't know why I'm doing this. He's going to kick my ass, I tell you. But pardon the expression. But we're doing a space skirmish, we've called it, where
Oh.
we're sort of taking images where we've got subjects sort of small in the frame. We've given them a lot of space, obviously, for his category.
Hmm.
You'll know that Andy Rouse did this last year.
Yes,
But
yes,
I almost feel that with this type of image, there's this sort of there's this crossover between landscape and nature wildlife, which this image comes into that area, because you take the birds out of this and it works as a landscape image, but you
exactly.
put the birds in, it just gives it something extra. And I just think
I
there's this crossover between landscape and nature. And do we want to keep putting things in boxes anyway? What's the point?
uh,
It's photography.
exactly. It's exactly. I this is what I totally I couldn't agree with you on more on this. Like, why do you gotta? Why does everything have to have a label, so to
Mm,
speak? So we don't need to actually. Some of the best composition tips I ever learned was from some landscape photographers, and because they sort of pay more attention to it than uh, the general wildlife photographers. And when you apply that and you come out with a better piece or body of work,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think so.
So some of the old you know masters of landscape and all that stuff, and when you apply that, it just turns out to be great. I mean, keep things simple, have strong compositions. You have a you know you have a bird in it, great. Like you said, it works both ways. I mean, my point is everybody knows what a bald eagle looks like.
Yeah,
So if I get close and I take an image of a bald eagle and put it up here for people to see, why does that make my bald eagle better than the other guy's bald eagle? It's a bald
exactly.
eagle.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what they
And
look like.
actually, when we were talking about sort of competition photography, and going back to sort of bird photography of the year when I was involved with that, yeah, I
Hmm.
think that the most difficult category, or the most skillful category in that competition, was actually birds in the environment, because
And the
it's much more
environment.
difficult to get a really good image of a bird in its environment, or if we're talking about wild art and space,
Hmm.
an animal or a plant or whatever it might be, some sort of natural subject, in its environment and in a context which is well composed and it really tells a story. And that is a really, really difficult skill. And that's, I think this competition has, the wild art competition has really sort of brought that home to me. It was a lesson I took away from bird photographer. And it's an area that I actually want to explore with my own work a bit more, because if you take it, as you say, if you take up a close up image of a bird or animal, whatever it is, pretty
Hmm.
much everybody can do that. When you
Exactly.
get to a certain level, it's not that hard. So how do you distinguish between one image and another? I mean, obviously there will be differences. There will be images that are better lit, have nicer
True.
colors or whatever. But it's much more difficult when you've got something like this, where there are so many different things, so many different elements to piece together, that actually it makes it, a lot more difficult for the photographer to come up with something that, that's really has that wow factor. But when it
Yeah,
works, my word, it works. Yeah.
I personally love this kind of photography. Minimalism, keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple.
Yeah.
If you can, if there are too many things, everything in an image should be there for a reason. Negative space should be there for a reason. Your subject should be there for a reason. What isn't there shouldn't be there for a reason, and what's there should be there for a reason. But if you keep your thing simple, I think it works really, really well.
Yeah, and
And
isn't photography as much about what you leave out as what you include?
exactly, is what you include.
Yeah.
And here, if you look at the bottom part of the image, there's a little, haziness to it. And this is in Yellowstone, and this was shot with 600 millimeter lens. Again, I think D850, because I was almost always attached to my camera to my 600 millimeter.
Yeah.
And I just leaned down, and I'm using the snowbank as a foreground element to blur the bottom out. And so it creates that glare. And then it was snowing lightly, and the birds were looking to the right, so you put them on the left of the frame, which meant that I had to have that little bush at the bottom right, but I felt that was okay.
Well, no, but I think it balances it.
Well. Yeah,
I think it completely balances it, because you've got a strong sort of base, and then you've got the birds looking into space. I think this is extraordinary. For as I said, I just think this is one of the most difficult things to do and pull off. Is this sort of birds in the environment, or animals, or whatever it is in the environment, and the subject is really small
in the frame. So it's
small
one of
in
those images that worked out rather well.
Yeah. No.
We were looking for them in January this year. The tree, obviously it's a dead tree. The tree wasn't there, so, and neither were the eagles. Unfortunately.
Well, it's but it just goes to show, make the most of the situations that you've got when they're in front of you.
Exactly. I mean, the way things are right now, some of my local ponds that when I first started photographing 10 years ago were full of ducks. They're empty now.
Yeah.
So use what you have now. Probably never going to get it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, going back to the snakes, I had locations where, I had adders pretty much guaranteed. And now I don't see them. I don't see them.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what you got next. So again, we're going back to sort of animals small in the frame, and sort of continuing this theme. But yet again, and you're breaking all the rules here again, by sort of, just having this sort of small area in the bottom of the frame in the ground, and then it's all about the sky,
it's
and
all
then
about
you've got
the sky.
and then you've just got this one point where your eye just gets drawn to straight away, and then you go around the frame, and and the sky is epic. I mean, it's all about the sky.
I've never seen a sky like this. It was just, this was in the Masai Mara, just before the pandemic. We were down there, and the whole day was horrible. There was not a sky, there was not a cloud in the sky. Bluebird every day. I was like, come on, this is just, the whole day was a disaster. And as the storm moved in, as we were driving out, and just before we went out, as the sky was going down, as the sun was going down, it just lit the sky up. And the whole thing to that was there was an opening in the horizon. And then we ran into a herd of impalas, and it just turned out to be absolutely magical. This one was lone, female, or maybe young male, hard to tell from here, but it was off from the rest of the herd, and so I got lucky. I was able to photograph this one by itself. And the goal here would be, some of the things about silhouettes is that they work when you know what the animal is. I mean, it's hard you can't tell if this is an impala unless they have the classic, male horns, but you can tell it's an antelope. And then, the sky supports it, or it supports the sky. And again, one of those landscape images you were talking about, where if you take the animal out, it's still a pretty picture to look at.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the projects that I actually want to work on myself, for my own photography, is putting animals or wildlife, whatever it might be, and it could be a flower or whatever, into context, into its landscape, and using those landscape, because I actually started life as a landscape photographer, and I thought I was
Did
good.
you?
Oh yeah, I thought I was good, and I
Mm.
look back at my work and I go, oh dear, you really weren't that good. I suppose, when I started my career, I actually looked to people that would agree with my opinion on my images. So I look for that sort of confirmation rather than looking for an objective opinion. I guess that's probably an insecurity on my part.
Yeah.
And of
And
course,
I
I think
guess
that's
everybody.
absolutely the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
I think you need an honest opinion. And now I am my worst, critic, and I think that's a good place to be. I look at some of the images again. Nah, it's just not good enough. And I
Yeah.
look at the stuff that's coming into the competition. I go, right, I know my stuff that is not competing with some of the stuff that's in this competition, so it's not good enough.
Good
I
enough.
need to do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. I'm like you. I hate my images. I hate my photography. Like, the amount of images I will process and then never post is
Yeah,
astounding. It's like, I don't like it. I don't like it. It's, now as I grow in my photography, I'm very, very selective about what I want to share. I don't want to post something and have people see it for the sake of seeing it. I'm like, nobody needs to see a close up off a bird. It's not a Sibley's. Open up a Sibley's guide, right?
yeah,
So I've become my own critic. I mean, landscape photography is something I would, learn to love and venture more into. But most of my landscape stuff is with animals in it. But sometimes you still, I would love to get more into that. But definitely, this is a kind of, I like kind of images that if I put in my on my wall, somebody would look at it and admire it rather than thinking, he's got Sibley's guide posted on
yeah.
his
And I think
living
that's the
room.
thing, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
something a bit different, something that people perhaps haven't seen before, and yeah, I definitely think that's the way to go. And
Mhm.
I said I've enjoyed this sort of really fantastic journey from the literal to the artistic, I call it, and sort of being involved in competitions has been a really big part. It's a really big part to play in that transition.
Mhm.
And I've just really enjoyed it because, as you say, I would have taken stuff, and I did, because at the start of it, actually, you could make money from stock photography, a few years
Yeah.
ago,
Mhm.
and showing my age now, but now you can't. That's not an option. If you think you're going to make money by taking images and putting them on Alamy or Shutterstock or
Yeah,
whatever,
those gone.
think again. It's not happening.
It's
You
not
know,
gonna happen.
it's
Agreed.
it's not happening.
Absolutely.
So now I shoot for me, and I think that's for most people, and particularly people that don't make a living from photography, I think that's a really good message. Actually, shoot the stuff that you want to shoot, and I think you'll produce much better work for it anyway because you're invested in it. You're more
Absolutely.
invested in it. Yeah,
I go back. I have this thing where, I've favorited some of my photographers based on what they like. All these guys have one thing in common. They don't post every day. They don't really have hundreds and thousands of followers. And they all produce, they'll post, but every post is going to be meaningful. It's not like
yeah,
post after post after post, that kind of deal. But yeah, the best thing is shoot for yourself and, break rules. It may work, it may not work, but you got to break them.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're just like, the next guy.
Yeah, it's not a formula, is it? I mean, you don't sort of sit
Nope,
down and
no,
go, right, okay, well, tick box exercise. Let's have a look at this. And
yeah,
oh,
no,
yeah, that
no,
that
no,
conforms, that conforms. No, no, no. I just think,
no.
we're photographers are artists. I think that gets lost. Just because you're painting with pixels doesn't mean that your art is less valuable than somebody that picks up a brush and a canvas.
Absolutely.
You
No,
know,
absolutely. Totally agree. I
yeah,
mean, people want to go photograph something, take a snap, that's fine. I'm not saying don't do that. If that's your thing, you enjoy it, do it.
yeah,
Fine. You want to be out in nature, do it. But, you know, I like to see things differently. I like to do it this way. My wife will sometimes say, enjoy the moment. I'm like, I am, but this is how I see things now.
yeah,
What makes you think I'm not enjoying it? I am totally enjoying it. Just how I see it.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to put the camera down, don't you, and go, I
Yeah,
just need to enjoy this moment, and
moment.
actually
Yeah,
perhaps, having a camera to my face is sort of robbing me of enjoying the moment
the
as I
moment.
should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, in this evening, we gave up the cameras, and then just the last 5-10 minutes, just watch them as
Yeah.
we go away.
How many images do you think you take in a year that you're really pleased with? I've asked quite a lot of people
Mm,
this question,
mm.
and I generally get the same answer. Actually, it's quite
I would
interesting.
say that I'm pleased with. I would
Yeah,
say maybe 5 to 10
yeah,
tops. Yeah,
yeah.
not more than
Do you
that.
know? Do you know the most
You know,
popular answer to that is 5?
5. Yeah, and
Yeah,
if you're doing anything more than that, you think too much of yourself.
yeah,
you know, if I hit 5, I think it's way too much.
yeah,
Some of my favorite photographers will work on a project once every 5 years, and you're like, wow,
yeah,
okay. And then they'll put out a book of maybe 100
yeah,
images once every
yeah.
5 years.
Hmm.
It's like,
No, I think that's fair, and well, we'll come on perhaps talk about projects actually. Let's go
mm,
on and let's see what you've got next.
all right.
So, this canvas backs.
This is a canvas back.
Yeah, yeah,
It's actually a very commonplace. We have this ducks that come, and then they basically winter in the Chesapeake Bay. And when you go there, you are sort of limited because everybody's facing the animals. They're right there, and there are hundreds of them, right, if not more. And people feed them corn, and it's like a frenzy
yeah,
going on. So you're like, okay. So again, I'm laying there taking an image. The guy next to me is laying there taking an image. The guy to the left of me, or the girl, or whoever it is, they're all taking the same image. So how do I do differently? This happened to be an overcast day, and I decided to use, I don't know what I used. I think there was a wave that I used when I took this shot, and then I
yeah.
was really overexposing it by 2/3 of a stop, and the white part
I'm
and everything else
surprising.
just
I thought you'd be
uh,
overexposing by more here, actually.
yeah,
But
probably I think it was 2/3, maybe 3 stops,
yeah,
and then just sort of got a high key, and then used the canvas back males in the background, out of focus to balance the subject in the front.
yeah.
And
I
I keep
thought
it
this was
simple.
yeah, I thought this was a really good example of using what's a common subject, well, for you at
Hmm.
least, and looking at it differently, and trying to come away with a different image rather than just that sort of typically exposed, as you're saying, field guide type shot.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
another. Yeah, it might be a nice picture, but how is it going to stand out from everybody
From
else that's taking exactly the same thing?
and one of the things, is when you're doing this, I mean, how are you going to take an image that is better than what you did last season, or you did
Yeah,
last week? I mean, if you're not doing that, if you're not working on getting better, I mean, yeah, maybe somebody doesn't care, but for me, in my photography, my biggest competitor is me from my
mm,
last outing. I
yeah,
want to be better than the guy that was there last year.
yeah. And I think that's a really good lesson. I mean, water birds are a great way of practicing and honing your skills anyway, I think, because if
Hmm.
you're looking at confiding species like this, where you can pretty much guarantee they're going to be there in
Yeah,
all sorts
yeah,
of conditions. You can go out, you can try different things, and if you fail, it doesn't matter, because it's not like, it's a rarity that you're never going to see again, and you must get, at least get a nice record picture, if you like, and then you've got
exactly,
that in the bag.
exactly.
It doesn't matter if you come away with something that you actually, you just delete everything, and I have, from some mornings I'll go out and spend a couple of hours, I get back
Yeah,
and go,
yeah,
nah, just delete it. There's
yeah,
nothing there that
mhm,
competes with what I've taken before, or there's nothing
yeah,
that's any different from what I've taken before. What's the point in keeping it and clogging up my hard drive?
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
but if you come out, so experiment, and that's what I keep saying to people. Just underexpose, overexpose, do motion, do something. You just do something a little different, and if you bin it, it doesn't matter. But learn from it, and you
Look
can
at it
take
and
those
move.
images away and go, actually, that almost worked. That kind of worked. If I tried that next time, maybe it would work. And And it's all about, I think, making mistakes and learning. You learn more from mistakes than you do from your successes.
No, I absolutely. I mean, if something works well, you're like, I don't want to change the formula. But I think absolutely, you got to learn. You got to play with light, high key, low key, play
Yeah.
with different looks. Overexpose, underexpose, flip your camera horizontal, vertical. Play with backlight, play with out of focus elements, uh, and try to keep your composition simple. I think simple compositions are the most. Not that complex compositions don't work, but it is easier for a simpler
Mm,
composition to work than it is for a complicated
yeah,
composition to work.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what you got next. Because I want to come on and talk to you about projects, actually. But
Mhm.
anyway, we'll start. We'll kick off with this. But you've done quite a lot of this sort of stuff as well. So tell people a little bit about this picture and how you put this together.
So yeah, so this is part of a local project. Speaking of projects, that I've always been fascinated by stuff that lives around us. So the
Hmm.
skunk was part of that. I photographed some, and this is in the middle of the pandemic in lockdown. Well, I wasn't in lockdown; I had to go to work every day. But at
Yeah,
that time,
you were
one
busy.
evening,
Yeah.
exactly one evening, um, he flew up and landed on the window right next to us. We were just outside in the summer having, and I'm like, oh, this is part of this is a backyard stuff. So I picked it up and I put it on one of the milkweeds. Uh, and I'm like, okay, let me photograph it. And as I'm trying to photograph, the sun started to set, and there's a tree in the background. And when the sun went in there, and when I opened the lens wide to 2.8, the light that was from the setting sun filtered through the tree. It was this. Now I could have taken a flash, and I did take some shots where I exposed for the background and illuminated the mantis with the flash. But for this one, I'm like, I'm liking the silhouette better.
Yeah.
Again, why do I need to light up the mantis? Does
And
people
it
want to
kind
see
of,
the mantis?
it doesn't feel natural when you do that, because I've tried
Exactly.
those sorts of things. It's, well, hang on a minute, you've got backlit, and now I can see all the detail in the animal.
And
That's
exactly.
yeah, that doesn't,
So
it's not what my eye sees.
exactly. So I just,
Yeah,
and then I saw the rim light that was coming on and I'm like, okay, let's underexpose, put the flash away, and I just photographed them and then
yeah,
positioned one of the brightest bokeh balls behind the mantis, and I took some uh, fired away a few shots, and then it got too dark to photograph. But
yeah,
it worked for me because the mantis was nicely silhouetted. The milkweed was nicely. There's some detail in it, but not too much detail that it makes it unnatural.
yeah,
And even in post, I didn't try to erase the shadows or anything. There was barely any processing of this one.
yeah. But again, it goes back to your point earlier about silhouettes, and when something
Yeah,
is instantly recognizable,
recognizable.
that's when a silhouette really works, I think. Because
Exactly. Otherwise, it's like, you know,
what's that? You got to
what's
work out
that
what it is.
exactly what it
Uh,
is.
Yeah, and I think it's another good point actually as well, is that if you have these sort of specular highlights, light shining through trees is a really good example of this, where you can create bokeh,
Yeah.
with those specular highlights. So if you I did it with, I had a, well, similar to you actually. I had a caterpillar. Was it
Hmm.
last year or the year before, whenever it was, and I knew, oh, well, hang on a minute, I've got light coming through the tree at the back of the garden. Oh, that's far enough away, I can create some nice bokeh with that. So I knew I could, and it actually rim lighted the hairs on the caterpillar really nicely as well. So, you know, uh,
Exactly.
yeah, just get creative. But if you've got those situations, and I've done it with plants as well. I did it with orchids and things where I've used exactly the same technique. So it's a good one for bokeh, that, if people want tips on
True.
bokeh.
So yeah, keep your lens at its widest aperture,
Yeah,
and there's some out of focus elements, but I think they actually add to the image rather than take away
yeah,
from it.
yeah,
And the pose, I got lucky, with the way it was resting its legs, but it just line up,
yeah.
take it slow,
Brilliant.
line it up, and take the image.
So this is is it part of a sort of project on local stuff that you were doing at the time, or you're still doing, or?
Yeah, this was, I started this, I would say a couple of years ago.
Mm,
Yeah, I have younger kids, so basically, with work and everything, travel wasn't that much. And I'm like, why do I have to wait for photography when I am traveling? Uh, you know, why
mm,
can I do it at home? So I almost, almost always, as you can see over here, have cameras ready to go. I have one with a sort of zoom 200 to 400, and I have a macro lens on my cameras in case something pops up. My house is it backs up to local woodland, so I always get stuff like I don't like to venture in there. It's like full of ticks. But come summer, I'll have butterflies in these, and I'd like to take
mm.
images. I mean, not necessarily this one, but I like to take images where I want to incorporate them with the environment, so to speak, just to give a message how, I mean, we aren't going away anytime soon. Although if we keep up at our antics, we will. But
Who knows? Yeah.
exactly, so we need to learn to live with them, and if we can sort of incorporate them, that hey, they're there, they're not doing anything, let them be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think projects give you a focus as well. I've sort of talked a bit about sort of losing my sort of way with photography a bit last year. Um,
Hmm.
having various things had sort of gone on, and you get sometimes you just get into this sort of space where the creativity just dries up completely, and you feel like you're never going to take a decent picture again, and the motivation then goes, and then you get into this sort of downward spiral, and you have to find a way out. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, and Andy Rouse said to me, he said, Rob, you need a project. Just get a project, focus on a project. And that was really good advice, actually.
Mm,
And now, so I started with water birds, and I thought, no, I'm just, I've got three really brilliant lakes, which are within 5 minutes of the house,
mhm,
in the car. So I can get there early. I can do early mornings before I start work,
mhm,
and I could go there regularly. So any really nice weather, I just
mhm,
get up early, and I just anyway. So that's what I started with. And the first time I went, uh, something just clicked. I came back with some nice images, and I had a really close encounter with an otter as well, which helped. And I thought, oh, nature is giving me something back here. And then it just went
yeah,
from there, and I kept on going back, and the more familiar you get with something, I think the better work comes out. As going back to our earlier comments, and
mhm,
then you get this sort of almost cohesive body of work forming. Going back to your comment before about people that working on projects for sort of almost 4 or 5 years, and then coming up with a book with 100 images in there,
yeah,
which is all
yeah.
centered around a theme.
Team,
So
absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so
No, I saw that video of yours. That was actually good. I've been, similar. You can see well, I don't know, one of these right here. We lost our cat. He was with us for 18 years.
yeah,
It was there before my kids were born. It was there before I met my wife. By accident, I ended up. So finally, he went, and you're like, oh my God, life seems to be at
yeah,
a full stop. But and then you sort of lose interest in photography and everyday else things. But eventually, yeah, projects help you get. I mean, even now, I have a camera trap set up in the backyard. I have a couple of images in mind incorporating the urban environment and the
yeah,
animals. And I'm waiting. I'm planting. I worked in the garden all day today, actually, planting flowers, hoping for the insects will be attracted again, like it is, and gives you opportunity.
yeah.
But
Well, that's sort
I
of
want to get, yeah, I
yeah.
want to
I
get
mean,
into flowers though. Like you got me excited the other day.
good. Well, that was what it was all about. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I've been posting a lot about flowers, just but it is
No,
spring. I mean, come on.
it's
It's
yeah. No, it's awesome. Everybody loves it.
Yeah, and well,
Yeah.
I'm planning one on bluebells, actually, because obviously that's sort of a quintessentially English or British thing.
English, British
Yeah,
thing.
English. Yeah, and and I mean, I've got loads of them in the wood up there, but I
Okay.
wanted to do everything from sort of wide, sort of almost landscape style vistas through to
Mm,
really intimate portraits, and then arty stuff like I've been
other
doing with
stuff like that.
the other videos I've been doing. So almost like a little project on that. But of course, I've not got long, because you've got this sort of 2 or 3 week window.
Window. You got to invest in a Lauva
Yeah,
15 millimeter macro lens for the
yeah,
F mount.
yeah.
for
I
that kind of
should
stuff.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you know, sort of talking to Andrew McLaughlin actually in the last
Mm.
Desert Island Pics. Yeah, he was sort of, talking
It's
about
a
that
great
brand.
it's a great lens.
Yeah.
It's a relatively cheap wide angle 1-to-1 macro at 15 millimeter for that kind of stuff. It'll be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that I want to work on a project of that. So that's probably going to be my next video actually, because I'll probably
Oh,
go back and I'll go back 4 or 5 times and make it over, those visits rather than sort of just make it in 1 or 2 hits like I've been doing, with some of the other stuff. But, I've also got something I want to talking about backyard stuff.
mm,
There's things in my back garden at the moment. I go, oh, I know, I must photograph that and make a really nice picture. And it just
mm.
goes to show that you don't have to step out too far. I can go
All
and
the
do it in
time. Yeah.
half an hour, with a cup of tea in my hand and go and be creative in the garden. So it's trying to inspire people. So if people haven't signed up or subscribed to the YouTube channel, do that, because it's there's lots of stuff coming. I've got lots of videos planned, and we're going to do more of this sort of stuff as well. We've got some more
Wonderful.
guests lined up. But yeah, and talking about urban stuff, then perhaps that's sort of with with the category that Rebecca's running, human nature.
Mm.
Later on in the year, Rebecca's actually coming on. We're going to do a live, which is probably going to be the next live actually, on the
All
8th
right.
of
Okay.
May. We're going to start talking
Yeah.
about that, because I thought we'd do that early to give people a really good idea about what we're looking for, to give them plenty of time to plan for that. Because I think
Go
it's
work that. Yeah.
July or August. I think she's running that. I should know
I'm
something,
looking
but
forward to that category
yeah,
actually.
yeah, I thought you might be.
Yeah.
Right, should we see what you got next?
All right.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. Normally,
Yes.
I always say I want to try and do this in an hour. Never works.
Yeah. It never works. Yeah. We'll keep it short. Yeah. This was
Yeah,
one of those simple, keep it simple composition. You know, overexpose. It's actually it's called the beautiful wood nymph, and what they do is they'll settle onto the reeds of the grass,
yeah.
mimicking a bird's dropping. Now, do they really do that, or this is human beings, projecting their own thoughts onto them? Who knows?
No, I think they do actually,
They
because
do. I mean,
there's
they could.
something else that does that over here. Yeah,
Does it?
yeah,
So that's what they do, and they fold up. And we were photographing different angles and everything, and I realized that the grass on the left was, sort of. So I actually just, at the bottom, I'm holding it. This one was without flash, and I just tilted the grass to the left and took this shot, and I thought it sort of balanced the one reed with the moth on it against his empty ones on the left.
yeah.
And the white background just keeps things simple. Lines always work with compositions great. And so this image was a result of that.
And I think this says two things to me. Firstly, it tells me, how versatile you are as a photographer, looking at all the other things that we've seen, earlier on in the evening.
Mm.
And it also tells me that you have this sort of deep love of nature, all the images that we've gone through tonight. And I think that's a very common ingredient for photographers that I really admire, and their work that I really admire, is that they are nature lovers first. And is that something that came for you first, and then photography
Um,
followed after that?
I actually grew up in the Himalayas, at the
Mm.
foothills of the Himalayas. And, life is different. My kids are growing up on iPads. My mom used to get out of the house, and we would go running up and down hills in the Himalayas.
Yeah,
And we would run into wild boars, and I just grew from there. Loved nature, and then for education and everything, moved to the cities and everything. So I lost touch. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, I live. Even when I moved to the U.S., I lived in New York City. I just don't like going back. I like to stay in nature. If any chance, anything I get, I want to go back to nature.
yeah.
Hands down.
New York's
And
a nice place to visit. I always
it
think,
was good. I can't
but
say. I
not to
mean, if
live.
somebody asked me, where, I mean, like, I love New York. I mean, I spent I lived there for like almost 20 years.
Yeah,
So yeah, so it's like, New York will always be home. But yeah, I'm glad that part is behind me. But
yeah,
yeah, absolutely, I adore nature, no doubt about it. And recently, what started as I don't want to be, I don't want to be called a bird photographer or a mammal photographer or a wildlife photographer. I don't want to be called anything, but if somebody's going to call me something, call me a nature photographer.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, going back to those
uh,
labels again that we were talking about
yeah,
earlier, and
yeah. Doesn't
you
have
know,
to have a label.
yeah. I mean,
You know, but
there's a category that I'm playing around with, possibly for next year actually in wild art,
mm,
which is called naturescapes, because we have
mhm,
this sort of, and we'll get on to talking about that, because you've got another
yeah,
image coming up which
okay,
you actually did quite well
uh-huh,
with. And there's this sort of crossover in wild art. That we've had a lot of sort of
absolutely, yeah,
landscape style images, which probably aren't focusing enough on the nature, but I think there's this area
mhm.
where the nature actually is showcased in a very sort of landscape style, and I think there's a real space for that,
I
because
would definitely. You
yeah,
know, I would absolutely love if you do something like that, and maybe perhaps like a. I mean, you guys do plenty for conservation, any as is. You know,
yeah,
with all the donation and everything. But there are a lot of those, conservation stories that people do, conservation type stuff.
yeah,
You can have a category for that too, whatever works. But
yeah.
landscape for sure, I think would be great.
Yeah. But
Naturescapes.
I said I want naturescapes because I think it's, that would all be all about celebrating, concentration has to be on the natural element of it, but
True, true,
it's
true.
celebrating nature, and it's, but in a broader sense, perhaps.
Sense, yeah. Hmm.
But it actually doesn't, it wouldn't, my vision for it isn't necessarily just completely wide vistas. It could be concentrating on,
On an
elements,
abstract image, yeah,
close
yeah,
up
yeah,
elements. Yeah. I mean, obviously we've got abstracts, so there's perhaps a bit of
yeah.
crossover there, but, there was, I've been watching a lot of YouTube recently, and, discovering some really
Mhm.
very innovative photographers that are posting some really, really quite nice, inspiring films
Stuff.
on YouTube that
You
they've been
know,
doing, and the way they approach photography. Yeah,
Wild Art introduced me to Shava. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. He was a
yeah,
portfolio winner last year.
yeah.
If you look at his
Yeah.
body of work, I mean, give me a,
My
So
word.
look at those abstracts and
Yeah.
stuff, like So I'm glad you're doing that. I think that should go very, very well.
Yeah, no, that's the sort of thing. That's the direction I want to take this, because
Yeah,
it's all about art, and it's all about celebrating nature.
nature.
And it
Yeah,
goes beyond just birds and mammals, and the sort of
absolutely.
I call them kind of high impact images, and they are, because they have this sort of, but there's a real depth.
Yeah.
There's a real depth to other stuff. As you're
There's
saying,
a
the
yeah,
Chabadoropsies of this world,
yeah.
they, and the sort of trapped leaves and under the ice, and those sorts of pictures that they see, and you go, wow,
You
that's
know,
something
and I
somebody's got a
recently
really good
started.
eye. Yeah,
Yeah, I recently started looking at them, and this image per se, Khurram Khan from 3 years ago would have never taken this.
yeah, yeah,
As time goes on, I'm using the 600 less and less, and my focal length is getting shorter and shorter.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, let's see what you got next.
sure.
And this is another one actually that, talking about sort of placing things in their environment,
Environment
and giving a bit of context, rather than just going in for the close up, sort of chocolate hit
details. Yeah,
image.
yeah. Mm,
There's
absolutely.
more to this.
Yeah,
There's these sort of lovely classic lead in lines, or lead out lines in this case,
lines
I
in this
think.
category. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and use a flash. This was basically after rain in broad daylight, actually around noon, and taking a walk in Costa Rica. Went there with my family, and this one popped up. It was actually sort of staying in this dried banana husk, and it's used. I used a 16 millimeter lens, wide angle lens. I had extension tubes on, and I used flash, as you can probably see in the eye of
yeah.
the black and green
Yeah, going
frog.
back to the thing I did with
Yeah,
Peter. Yeah, always, always
yeah,
look at the
yeah.
eyes. Yeah,
Look at the eyes, and then basically, expose for the highlights, and then fill everything else with flash.
yeah. And what I like about this is that, you've not just concentrated on the frog. The whole scene has been, you've taken the whole scene into, into consideration, and you've composed it so it's just so nicely balanced.
Yes,
There's some
yeah,
real thought gone into this, rather than just sort of concentrating on the animal and going, "Right, I've got
on
to
the
get."
animal.
Yeah,
Gotta get it. Yeah, and
yeah,
and and, and I did take some close up shots, but I never really bothered with those. They're in any Costa Rica guidebook, but this one I particularly liked.
Yeah, and again, it tells a story, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Do you get flustered when you get one of these sort of fantastic situations in front of you? You know things aren't going to last very long, and you've got a very short period of time. Do you sort of get a bit like a headless idiot, like I do, like running around?
Absolutely. You're like, and then even this was like, oh, okay. So there were 3 of them actually here, and my first instinct was like, and I knew the kind of images I mean, I didn't plan this, but I knew I wanted to photograph them wide angle in their environment, in use flash. That was the idea. But this one, the first thing was, oh, okay, let me just get it. So I got a few portraits with my macro lens, and then finally this one was the last one. And what was going on, they were coming out of this and then jumping to the right. And so what I did was, I had 2 bodies. I had one with a 16-35, and I had one with a 105 macro with me. So I just threw the one with the macro on the ground and took a shot, and they were both synced to my flash. And so I got the shot. As you can see, it's about to turn. It jumped like right after this frame. It jumped off, and that was the end of that shoot. But
it's almost hurdling there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Leg position. I was like, oh my God, it's never going to happen. It's like, and you can't pick them up. You shouldn't pick up amphibians anyhow. But this guy, you definitely don't want to pick up. Because it's a poison dart frog, so it's going to go, and they're very, very small.
Yeah. Now, how big is this? Sort of, what, a couple of centimeters long? Or?
Yeah, maybe this big at best.
Wow.
Yeah, they're very, very small. And so this is a 24 millimeter, with extension tubes on the 16-35 with the camera right on its face, and I'm holding the camera with one, and I'm holding the flash this way with the user.
Yeah, I've been in that position before. You're trying to juggle.
So I got one juggle. I got one shot. I'm like, yes. Yeah. So
and that's all you need, isn't it? I mean, you only need one frame that works. But just
true. I mean, I used to go out on an outing and shoot like 2,000 images, and they were all mostly garbage. And now I'll go out and have maybe 20 images, and I'll probably delete them all or keep one, so to speak.
Do you deliberately shoot less now, but concentrate on the
moment? I don't deliberately, but I think over time, my eye has changed. My finger has obviously gotten accustomed. So it's like, okay, I don't need to, I'm not. You'll see one of those people that will, a couple of our friends, we have a good laugh about it. They'll shoot a lot, but I'm actually very, very, conservative with my shutter.
Yeah.
I mean, if something's running in front of me, having action,
And I guess it depends on the subject as well, isn't it? I mean, if I go out and I do some
yeah.
woodland stuff, I'll come back with maybe a couple of 100 pictures. If I and that'll be all day. And if I go out and shoot water birds, I might come back with 1,500 in a couple of hours. Just
exactly. Yeah. Yep.
That's it. Most of them will end up in the garbage, as you say. But anyway, what have you? Okay, so we got your last picture. I'm talking about sort of naturescapes and that sort of landscape vibe. I love this.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. This is in Yellowstone, and this is in the interior of Yellowstone. I first came here in the summer, and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of nice, and it was all sort of dead grass underneath because you have all these thermal activity going on. And these trees are known as bobby sots. You can't see them, but what they do is all the minerals seep into the bottom of these pines, and the bottom of them are actually, if you Google bobby sock trees, they're all white at the bottom.
Right.
So I took a few shots. There was this little stream, and that was in the summer. And then when we came back this year, it was a horrible day. It was like misty and cloudy. We're not seeing any animals. And then we came to this spot, and I'm like, oh, this was absolutely, it had snowed. It was because of the fog and everything that was preventing us from photographing animals. The sun wasn't that, and I just jumped out. I didn't even have my highest megapixel camera. I actually took it with my A9, which is only 24 megapixel. I had a dedicated lens for landscape.
Don't know why you bothered. Only 24?
Only 24. I put that in. And I'm like, oh, what should I do? And I just, underexposed expose for the highlights, put the tree smack in the middle, handheld. I'm like, I was just so scared that, like as if the sun's going to burn the fog within like 2 minutes. It wasn't going to happen. And I just, once I got this shot, and, and this was from a 24 to 105, I was so happy with it. Probably the best shot in Yellowstone that I ended up getting.
Yeah, no, I really like this one. I saw this image. That's the sort of landscape photographer in me coming out, and just
exactly.
really appreciating actually how difficult this is.
This is the wannabe landscape photographer in me.
Yeah. But no, as I said, I think that putting people in pigeonholes and photography in pigeonholes. I don't know. I mean, I understand why people do it.
People do that, but I think we do a disservice to that, right? So one of
it's nature. I was watching something today on one of the most well-known landscape photographers in the UK actually was being interviewed by somebody else, and they were talking about woodland photography, and they were talking about it from a landscape photographer's perspective, but they talked about their love of nature. That was the most important element in the discussion, was the love of nature. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hang on, this isn't a landscape discussion. This is a nature discussion. This is a nature photography discussion from, people that are skilled or are known for their skills in landscape photography. But there's this sort of overlap, I've been talking about before. And one of my projects that I want to work on over the next 2 or 3 years is woodland photography. Everything from sort of these wide vistas where these people, some of the stuff that I've seen is just mind-blowingly good, where people are skilled in taking something which is rather chaotic and piecing together compositions that work. And tell a story about about an environment. So I want to do everything from that right down to right down to the sort of smallest bug or plant, so there's a real story, there's a real body of work which covers everything within that woodland environment. Woodland birds, for example, I mean, how difficult is that? We all know how difficult that is. So that's kind of one of my projects.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing that category, though. Yeah, that would be.
That's really something that it'll either be next year or the year after. It depends on how everything else shapes up, but certainly that's something that I want to do. And I've mentioned it to a few people, and it seems to have got quite a good reaction.
One thing I want to mention is, like, here I've been to this place, this exact spot that I've been 4 times, and this was the 4th time that I the right conditions for this sort of an image.
Wow.
Like almost, because I mean, obviously this isn't Yellowstone, so and didn't even I actually, the other thing I would probably like to mention is, like, people talk about always using the lowest ISO. I was so scared that I'm going to lose the conditions that I jumped out and I had an ISO of 400 to have a shutter speed to have everything, sharp. I'm like, today's cameras.
As we were talking about before, I mean, 400 ISO. I mean, I used to worry about that with the old Canon 5D. The old Canon 5D, the first one that came out, the 12 mega, you got to 400 ISO and the noise started creeping in with that.
Oh boy.
Now you don't worry about it. I mean, I don't know, D850, what, 3,200?
Probably more. I mean, I've easily pushed it. And this was one of those, after I was done with this image, like, I'm probably not going to get a better image here. And I just enjoyed the scene after that.
And I think that is, it's taking the time to enjoy where you are and enjoy the moment and appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Rather than having that camera stuck to your face. So just a few other comments we're catching up with. A few other people have been commenting as we've been chatting. But Misha Raza says hello, and Linda African Safari. Speaking of travel, it's time to go back to Africa. Well, with COVID, hopefully. Well, who knows? It's another new variant in the UK apparently.
Oh boy.
So who knows? And Nazma Aslam says good vibes. Sue Harper says hi from Oz. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
And Alan James, thanks, Rob and Khurram. Great shots. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were guaranteed great shots from Khurram, for Christ's sakes.
Thank you.
Some amazing stuff. So it's sort of we've done your 10 images, so it's kind of time. This would be the point in the radio show where you get cast away to your fictional desert island.
Fair enough.
which one of these shots out of all 10, if you could only save one from a computer hard drive crash, let's say, which one would it be? Which one would it be?
Which one? I'm actually thinking which ones were there.
I'll tell you what, I can remind you of that because I've got a slide lined up.
Slide lined up.
There you go. There's a reminder.
Out of all of these, the one that if I could probably has to be simple, either the bear or the eagles.
Yeah.
Because simple snow minimalism, I love that.
Okay. So you get on your desert island, you get your usual camera body, a 50mm lens, and I'll allow you another lens of your choice. What lens would that be and why?
I would get a Sony A1 and a 70-200 2.8. Again, when I started out, 600 was my lens of choice, and since then, I've moved away, and even in this one, I think only 3 images over the 600.
Wow.
So my taste has changed, and I like a broader picture. It can do macro, it can do landscapes, it can do animals, it can do lots of stuff. So that's probably, if I had one body, one lens, A1 and the Sony 70-200.
Yeah, cool. And you get a luxury item of photography gear as well. What would that be?
Luxury item other than a lens?
Yeah, other than a lens, yeah.
Other than a lens, probably I would say flash.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
because
it's
a
yours.
lot of it, yeah.
And with your wildlife skills, you'd be able to tell where you were. I reckon you'd be able to work out where you were by the birds coming past.
Hopefully. Hopefully.
Absolutely right. A couple of other comments coming in. Jane O'Connor says this has been really interesting and informative as usual. Thank you. Our pleasure, Jane. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And Ben Pullitz says amazing pics. Really cool to hear about the understanding of how you use flash in your images, Khurram. Yeah,
thank you.
I think, well, flash is something I think we ought to do a little bit more on, actually, because that is something that people are a little hesitant about, I think.
It's one of the most misunderstood photography equipment.
Yeah. Well, it's just slightly nervous about it, and I don't think you should be. So yeah, well, maybe we'll do something on that at some point, and maybe we'll have you back on to talk about that, Khurram. So Jeff Kaufman says, beautiful photos and great info. Thanks for sharing. That's a pleasure, Jeff. Khurram, it's been really good to talk to you. Really good to have you on. So thank you for
my
that.
Pleasure, Rob.
Thank you for disrupting your lazy Sunday.
No, it was good. It worked out very well. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Right, let me just stop sharing that screen, and I'll bring you back up live. So hang on the line. We'll have a quick chat afterwards.
Sure.
But I'll take you out of the studio, put you back in the green room, and I'll finish up, and we'll have a quick chat afterwards. But thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. It was great to chat, and thank you for all the lovely images as well. So yeah.
Anytime.
Okay. All right, Khurram. We'll have a quick chat in a bit, but I'll just wrap up. Okay. Well, what another fantastic chat. No, I'm just lining up the outro. Yeah, another fantastic chat. And we're going to be doing more of these sort of desert island pics. I'm not sure what the next one will be yet. I've a couple of people that I'm talking to at the moment, and I'll let you all know when I've lined that up and when the dates are. But the next live will be, let me get this right, on the 8th of May. With Rebecca Nason, so it's a couple of weeks' time, and we're going to be talking about her category, which is human nature, which is coming up later in the year. So her wild art photographer of the year category. So if you want to know a little bit more about that and what Rebecca will be looking for, then be sure to tune in and catch that one. So I will see you on the 8th of May. And don't forget that there's a week left for where are we now? We are on Eyes. So yes, you have a week left to enter Eyes. So don't miss out on that one. Peter's really looking forward to going through all your wonderful images. But until then, till the 8th of May, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next time.